No.
Okay.
So we're live. It says video playback interrupted. Please try again.
Are you trying to? Is this?
Yeah.
So this is saying that it's live.
Oh, you're recording?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our goal is to send it out over the internet.
Oh, okay.
Okay. There it is. It's good. So
It's going?
yeah, Marisa, is this working? Can you hear us?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, let's see if it's
the people on
working.
there.
Yeah, I'm just seeing if they respond.
Live on YouTube. Great.
Yeah, so if it works, it works. If it doesn't,
If it doesn't, it's fine. We've got other recordings we can put up later.
Someone says they can hear you. So
Okay, good.
just that you get the point across. And I'll just check it once in a while. Yay.
Okay. All right, how's everybody doing? Good. Good. All right, so today we're going to be talking about planetary dignity and Shadbala. Is there anyone here who does not know what planetary dignity is? How about Shadbala? I don't know what these are. Okay. All right. Are you Rita? Okay. Good meeting. One of the reasons I like to talk about planetary dignity and Shadbala is because they serve as the foundation for just about every other technique. Because what planetary dignity does, what Shadbala do, is they tell you how a planet's going to function and how strong a planet's going to be. So I've made this PowerPoint presentation. This is the second PowerPoint presentation I've ever made in my life. So please bear with me. So we're doing planetary dignity and Shadbala, the key techniques and principles of Vedic astrology. And before we get anywhere with techniques, we have to figure out what is dignity and what is Shadbala, astrologically speaking. And so planetary dignity. Now, if you're new to astrology, you might be wondering, well, where do we see this in the chart? I do have a slide for that, it's just a few down. But the main idea behind planetary dignity is, can a planet fulfill its agenda? And what I mean by that is, so when you go to work and you've got your job, your agenda is to do your job, right? If you're a lawyer, it's to do law. If you're an accountant, it's to do accounting. Well, each planet has a role to play in your chart. Everyone needs Saturn for some reason. Everyone needs Venus for some reason. Everyone needs Mars for some reason. So we're looking at dignity, whether a planet's in good dignity, whether it's exalted, great friend, and again, I've got a slide to show you this. That will tell you, generally speaking, how well is that planet going to be able to do what it needs to do so that it can be successful in your life. Okay. So how well does it fulfill its agenda? How well can the planet take care of the house that it rules? So in Vedic astrology, we have house rulerships. For example, the 10th house often deals with our status. It deals with how people see us, and it's how we interact with the world, the activity that we engage in life. So if you have a well-dignified 10th lord, that can show you that generally speaking, your status, your career, the activity that you take in life will tend to work better. Third house, for example, deals with our siblings or our peers or the people we hang out with. So if we're looking at the third lord, and the third lord's about dignity, it tends to make it so that we have maybe more difficulty relating to our siblings, interacting with our siblings, or maybe our peers might have some difficulties with how we approach our life. So when we're thinking about dignity, number one, you're thinking about what does the planet mean by itself, being Mars, being Jupiter, being Saturn. And then you think to yourself, what does it mean in regards to what house does the planet rule? And this will tell you how well formed that area of life represented by that house is being taken care of. Does this make sense, what I'm trying to say here? If not, just raise your hand and I can clarify. Is there any questions? Corey, did you have a question? No? Did you have a question? Okay. Now, another thing about dignity is there's a calculation that we use that shows us how much merit have we accumulated with that planet. And so obviously this is working off the theories of reincarnation. And the idea is that we have multiple lifetimes that we have been around, multiple lifetimes that we have put things into action. We have habits, tendencies, everything that we've done creates a karma for us, right? So when we're looking at dignity, we want to know, for example, if we're thinking about Venus, if we're thinking about Venus, what does Venus sometimes represent in a person's chart? Anyone? Spouse. Spouse. Women. Beautiful things. Refinement. So with the theory of reincarnation, if we have a planet in good dignity and it's Venus, that would tell us that throughout our past lifetimes, we have tended to take care of Venetian things, like the women in our life. If we're male, if we're heterosexual male, our spouse. Our clothing, our fashion, whatever it might be, even diplomacy. So Venus is very, very big on diplomacy. That's why it often makes politicians. So if someone has spent lifetimes developing their diplomacy and their political capacities, Venus will tend to be in better dignity. Does this make sense? Okay, no problem. So with all the planets, to really get into dignity, this is a very fundamental principle, but you also have to know the basics of what is Venus, what is Mars, what is Jupiter. So those of you who don't know that, really go back and start considering to yourself, read the old books about what do each of these planets represent as a natural karaka. Karaka just means indicator, okay? So Shadbala, discuss dignity. So Shadbala, what is Shadbala astrologically speaking? Generally, we consider it to be the raw power of the planet. Oops. So Shadbala is the raw power of the planet. What does that mean? Well, if we are thinking that maybe our Venus was not utilized so well in past lifetimes, and so we're not very diplomatic, we've not handled our relationship with women in our life very well, and that makes a bad dignity, which is a difficult karma. That means in this lifetime, when we try to relate to women or feminine things, when we try to relate to music or poetry or diplomacy, we're not very good at it. So we're going to tend to fail in those areas. Now, how harshly are you going to fail? That's where Shadbala can play a role. Because you can have a planet in good dignity, which shows good karmas, but it can have a low Shadbala, which means it doesn't have the power to knock you down. But if you have a planet in bad dignity, which could indicate difficult karma, and that planet comes along and it has massive Shadbala, that's the one that can take you out. You understand what I'm saying here? Okay. So we have to consider dignity in regards to the qualities of the karmas of our charts, and we consider Shadbala to figure out how potent is that karma. Okay. Yeah. So this is generally what you need to know about Shadbala as a principle. Another thing that Shadbala tells us is how well can we stand in the strength of the planet. And what does that mean? Well, let's think about Mars. And this is always a good one because it's funny to hear what people have to say about it. When you think about someone who has a strong Mars, what kind of person would you think they would be? What's like a quality they would have?
Courageous.
So courageous? What? Aggression.
Discipline.
What was that?
Discipline.
Logic, discipline.
Logic. Discipline's more of Saturn.
Yeah.
So
Problems with siblings.
yes. Okay. So these are the things we think about. However, what's fascinating about this is that Mars is not aggression in the macho sense. Mars is not, I'm tough, I'm mean, and I'm going to just steamroll you. Mars is courage. Mars is the appropriate use of aggression, right? So what's fascinating is when we have a planet like Mars in good Shadbala, that will show us that when a problem arises, when the invading army comes and we're a farmer, we can turn our plows into swords and go take care of it. That's a good Mars. That's a strong Mars. But it doesn't mean that when Mars has good Shadbala, that we're just tough and we beat up people and we're mean to others and we try to belittle them like a difficult Mars would do. You see, because when Mars is not in a good situation, he tends to overcompensate, right? And when Mars is strong, he knows what his power is. All right. So many of you have already heard the story that a few days ago, as I was visiting with Ernst and we were all having a good time talking about astrology, we decided to spend the rest of the evening wrestling, which is how I got this cut on my face and whatnot. And so Ernst is a good example of this because he is the sweetest guy, but when he needs to use aggression, he knows how to do it well. He studied martial arts and these sorts of things. So when you're thinking about these planets, never try to lock them into stereotypes. You need to think about if this planet was working in its highest capacity, meaning if it was doing what it's meant to be doing in this world, this is how it would act. And when you're thinking about a planet in the opposite, it's almost like the planet acts childish. Like that's when the planet's not strong, but it's overcompensating, right? So how well can you stand in the strength of the planet? The stronger the Shadbala, the better the qualities of that planet can come out in you at the appropriate time.
And if it's weak, then it's the opposite. It's a negative effect.
If it's weak, it's harder for you to understand how to deal with it. So like, for example, Saturn's a good one. Saturn deals with the capacity to bear hardships, all right? So most of the time we think, oh, this person has a strong Saturn. Now, try to get out of your head what I was just telling you. But when you think about someone who has a prominent Saturn in their life, what do you think their personality is going to be like?
Detached.
Serious, detached. Anything else?
It's attention, detail, very
Attention,
good,
detail.
discipline.
What was that?
Discipline.
Serious.
Structured, organized.
Okay, well, you're all good. You've got this. All right. Usually what people say is they're depressed, they're sad, they can't handle change well. And so what you described was a good Saturn. So that is a strong Saturn. When Saturn has a weakness, that's when something bad happens and the person just breaks down. They can't deal with it. That's when a person has maybe, sometimes it depends on some other planets, but maybe a Pollyanna attitude where they're going around saying, life should be perfect all the time. And when you have a strong Saturn, you realize things die, people change. Grief comes in and grief goes out, which is, in my sense, why I think, people talk about Jupiter as being a planet of religion and spirituality, but in my mind, it's actually Saturn. Because if you can if you can stand in the strength of Saturn, you can stand in anything, right? But if you can stand in the strength of Jupiter, yes, that will be helpful for you with knowledge, and that will be helpful with you with grace and luck and fortune. But what happens when your luck runs out? Okay.
When you were talking about Venus, you were saying that if the dignity is good, then it indicates, we've been doing a lot of good work with Venus. We know how to work good with Venus.
Yes.
And if the Shadbala is high, that's either going to be intense or not important.
Right.
When you talked about Mars, then you said if the Shadbala is high, then my Mars is good.
Right.
So it seemed like you switched.
Yeah, I didn't switch, and that's a good point. Basically, there are two levels that we're considering here. So like, for example, with Shadbala, we're using that to consider like the natural quality that you can express of that planet when you need it. But when we're talking about dignity, that's a good point. When you're talking about dignity, it would be like if you take a yoga, say, for example, the 7th lord of the 8th house, and it's Venus, and it's in bad dignity, then that karma related to Venus ruling the 7th, active in the 8th, that's typically where you're going to fail. And if that Shadbala is stronger, it can make it you fail more forcefully, right? So this is an important point. I do have some slides that have a little note down here. And the notes that you always have to remember is what I'm describing here, I spent 20 hours just talking about Shadbala itself in one particular course. And the same thing with dignity. So there are going to be things that we can't quite necessarily specify so much. So we'll just be general here today, okay? But I'll try to keep the notes there so you understand how we're switching and keeping it in their proper place. All right. So you keep me on my toes.
What was your answer?
Which part?
I didn't get your answer.
Oh, my answer is when you're thinking about Shadbala, you're thinking about how can they stand on the strength of that planet. All right. When you're thinking about dignity, you're taking it more to how, say, house lords are ruling what they're doing. So a karma of a house lord, say 7th lord and the 8th, is going to mean something. All right. And based on that planet, giving it further qualification, then that's going to tell us, when you look at Shadbala, with how much is it going to impact you. Does this make sense? Does this help clarify it? If not, help me.
So if my Mars is in Cancer, am I a brave person, or am I a guy who makes fun of people because I'm overcompensating?
Generally, if everything else is equal, there will generally be either overcompensation, or the person will never really they will never be able to utilize that Mars based on, again, the house lordship. So let's take it this way. So if you've got Mars exalted in Cancer, and you are debilitated. Mars is debilitated in Cancer, and then you are a Taurus ascendant, right? So that's going to be influencing third house things. So you would have difficulty with Martian qualities related to siblings, peers, and colleagues. So you might be the guy that you got a lot of friends, but they all pick on you. And again, that's a very big generality.
And now, if that Mars has a strong Shadbala, it's a big problem for me. And
it's when, yes, such a big deal. When that Mars has stronger Shadbala, but again, when you get that's going to affect the Shadbala. But when you get Mars with Shadbala, that's going to show how much is it in your face. Because some people could care less. Some people, you see them taking the example of the third house with Mars, and they could be picked on all the time. They could be overrun by their peers, and they never even realize that it's happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you get other people that when you talk to them, that's all they talk about is how my brother does this, my sister does that, and so on. So it's more of an awareness factor. Okay. Was there another question?
Just something with it. I know it's not the case all the time, but since some of the qualities that go into Shadbala are also part of dignity.
Right.
So there's more of a tendency, if it has a high Shadbala, that it's got some pretty decent dignity. Not always. Not always,
but yes. Yeah. There are so many factors, and I do have a list here of what those factors are. But that's an important point, is that what we're also going to find in astrology, particularly with things like dignity and Shadbala, is that there's always an interweaving of principles. So for example, if you would just study Shadbala, there are 6 strengths of Shadbala. And what most people do, as we'll see, is they just look at the raw score and they just go with that. But each of the scores in Shadbala represents something specific about how you work with that planet. So right now I'm just generally saying, how can we stand in the strength of that planet? Well, there's a particular calculation in Shadbala called Sedona Bala, and that's the specific one in regards to how well do you stand in the strength of that planet. There's another one called Digbala, which is how well do you roll with the punches of that planet? How well are you able to direct your energy with that planet? So again, what we always have to remember is in a 2-hour class, there's going to be some things that we can't quite get into. Okay, so these are going to be generalities, but things that you can apply